Neighbor, a convicted bully, dared me to call the police over his constant trespassing, but our Gothic fence finally won the battle. We moved into our new home when my daughter was just 2 months old. It should have been an exciting new chapter, but right from the start, our neighbors felt like a challenge I wasn't ready for. They had this oversized truck, a Jeep, and a motorcycle, which they shamelessly parked all over our driveway, occupying every inch of space like it was theirs by right. I held on to the hope they'd eventually realize someone actually lived here now, and maybe, just maybe, stop. For a while, it seemed they caught on, but only half-heartedly. The man next door, though, still wasn't getting the hint. He'd rev his motorcycle straight down my driveway, sometimes parking it smack in the middle. Most of the time, he'd leave before my husband and I got home, so the awkward confrontation I dreaded never happened. But then my husband had to deploy, and not long after, I broke my leg, leaving our car to sit unmoving and isolated in the driveway. It was as though the neighbors clocked our vulnerability. They slid right back into old habits and started using the driveway as their own personal auto shop. At one point, the guy parked his massive truck in our space and began changing out his lifted tires, taking up the entire area as though we didn't exist. This went on for 3 months, 3 months of feeling invisible, until finally, I was able to hobble up the steps and confront him. I'm 5 feet 2 inches, and this man looked like he could crush me with a glare. Everything about him, the swagger, the way he wore his clothes, how he scanned me up and down, radiated danger. He had that time served in jail vibe, or at the very least, hot-headed, unpredictable energy. I forced myself to be firm but polite, summoning whatever courage I had left. I need you to move your motorcycle off my driveway. This is not a shared space, it's private property, I told him, hoping this would end things. Of course, it didn't. He never really stopped. But as it turned out, the parking wasn't even the worst part. They lived in the top unit of their condo, but left their big, open trash can at the bottom of their stairs, right next to my driveway. Every week, I'd watch them toss bag after bag down from above, but they never bothered to clean up the mess. That inevitably spilled out. At first, they kept the lid wide open, letting the bugs and animals have a feast. One day, after picking my daughter up, we came home to a scene out of a horror movie, swarms of bugs, everywhere, all pouring out from that trash can. I tried to shield my daughter, but we got attacked, and by the time we made it inside, both of us were covered in welts. Her little skin reacted badly, inflaming those bites into big, angry red patches. Mine wasn't much better. With my husband away and my patience gone, I decided to contact the property manager. Their trash was a disaster and clearly the root cause of the mosquito invasion. I found the number on the sign outside the house and texted her early that Saturday, around 7 or 8 a.m. I didn't realize it wasn't a business line. When she finally replied, she was unbelievably offended that I'd contacted her at such an hour, on the weekend. That stung. I felt helpless. I asked if I could have the landlord's number, figuring maybe I'd get a better response. Big mistake. She wasn't just the manager, she owned the place herself, which the sign never said, but it explained why she immediately shut down all further communication between us. Worse, she apparently told the neighbors about my complaint but spun it in a way that made it clear I was now the problem. The neighbors must have gotten an earful, because now the trash can lid stayed closed, but the shift-in attitude was obvious. She also looped the downstairs neighbors into the conversation. They started glaring at me too, no matter that I'd specifically mentioned in my message that I hadn't seen them contribute to the mess. Clearly, it didn't matter, I'd only managed to make myself the neighborhood pariah. Then the summer heat settled in, and my husband finally returned home. The upstairs neighbors' kids started playing outside more often, something I might have found sweet under almost any other circumstances. Ours isn't a cul-de-sac, and cars speed down our street regularly. I worried about those kids from a distance, even thinking about approaching the city to paint a hopscotch pad on the sidewalk or build them a little free library. There's a blind spot at the top of my driveway, which worried me especially when kids played nearby. One day, I turned in and saw them right in front of my car. I slammed on the brakes, stopping 10 feet short. Some of them were so tiny, it chilled me to the core. I got out and asked them as gently as I could not to play in my driveway, it was just too dangerous. They nodded bashfully and ran off. But after that, it was as though I'd become the storybook villain of the neighborhood. Suddenly, toys started being thrown at our windows and doors, and some kids would sneak onto our back porch at night, sometimes around 10 p.m., when nothing good can happen. It was clearly escalating. One day, led by the eldest boy, he was 14, they took a sledgehammer to a cinder block, breaking it into pieces and then hurling the chunks at our house. It seemed like the biggest incidents always happened when my husband was deployed and the car was gone, as if the absence emboldened them. That time, I'd had enough. I marched outside and told the kids to get off my property or I'd call the cops. The 14-year-old just sneered, "Do it. What are they going to do? We're kids, it's a driveway, get over it." So, I did exactly that. When the police arrived, they explained to the neighbors where the property line was and told them legal proceedings would follow if they kept trespassing. At the officer's suggestion, I put up some pretty colorful no trespassing signs and started calling the police every time something happened. But after 3 calls, it was clear the police weren't going to be much help. They said it was a civil matter, but maddeningly, Couldn't give me the names of the adults living there so I could file a claim. Even with video evidence, unless the neighbors were physically on my property when police arrived, citations weren't possible. It got worse. Watching my cameras one day, I saw the kids scooping up the cinderblock pieces they'd thrown at my home, only now they were aiming them at the downstairs neighbor's dog. At first, I couldn't tell if the dog was actually there, but then movement on camera confirmed it, rock after rock thrown at the poor animal. That's when I called animal control, and they managed to get in touch with the downstairs neighbors, who weren't home at the time. The woman from downstairs came over afterward. I explained that my intention wasn't to be some sort of monster neighbor, that I didn't hate kids, and told her, truthfully, that her child was the only well-mannered one in the whole lot. I showed her the video to make sure she saw what was happening. We exchanged phone numbers. Part of me hoped we'd find some common ground, maybe even become friends. But I could tell she was just trying to keep her head down and not get involved with the upstairs chaos. I respected that, honestly. The brick throwing at the dog finally stopped. After that, though, she and I didn't talk much. A few weeks later, she asked if I'd seen anyone take her son's bike on my cameras. I hadn't caught anything, so I told her as much. And so, life settled into a tense stalemate, my everyday colored by my neighbor's pettiness, my nerves on edge, but always determined to protect my family and my home, no matter how much they wished I'd just back down. The kids next door wouldn't stop trespassing on our driveway. Whenever we tried to talk to them, they'd just twerk, flip off our cameras, and keep crossing the property line like it was their own personal street. The whole family treated the driveway like a dump, constantly littering with no shame. The father seemed to take real pleasure in antagonizing us. He'd rev his motorcycle as he blasted down our driveway every other day, sometimes coming within inches of our parked car, almost daring us to say something. We'd worked so hard to buy this home, and it took everything we had not to explode. Finally, after months of scraping together every spare penny, we managed to get enough for a fence. As soon as we had most of the materials, we started the paperwork and applied for a permit with the city. Things started shifting a bit. My husband was out in the yard more often, thanks to a lawnmower we'd been recently gifted. He was determined to reclaim even that small slice of peace. Just yesterday, as my husband was working in the yard, the man next door rolled down our driveway again, blatantly, right in front of him, narrowly missing him with his motorcycle, and I swear, it seemed intentional. That was the last straw. Angry words flew between them on our property, the man still sitting atop his motorcycle, parked squarely where he had no right to be. For the first time, we finally got to hear his real justification. He claimed it was just a driveway, he wasn't hurting anyone, so what was the harm in using it? My husband shot back, pointing out that not only was he actively trespassing, but his kids had thrown rocks at our house. Harm had absolutely been done. You'd think that would be the end, but the man insisted they were separate issues. He acted like his family and their behavior weren't connected at all. And then out came the pièce de resistance, the excuse he must have been sitting on for months. According to him, his landlord screwed him over and forced him to share a driveway with his own downstairs neighbors in the past. So in his mind, since he suffered, we should too. He ended it by daring us to call the police, but by then, it was too late for all that. Our permit was approved, our fence panels were waiting. My husband just laughed and told him, we have our own solution. 3 hours later, as fate would have it, the man came home to see my husband putting up the fence posts, right in view for his whole family. They stood huddled on their balcony, whispering, but my husband could hear every word. The man muttered, that that's probably not even the correct line, and the woman shot back, it is. She knew because we have an official survey, and the police themselves told them exactly where the boundary was. Defeated, all he could grumble was, it's not even that big of a deal. But here's my favorite part, this fence is going to be beautiful. My husband originally wanted a towering 6-footer, but the city wouldn't let us take it all the way out to the sidewalk. Instead, we ended up with these gorgeous Gothic picket panels and some lovely cedar stain and seal. They didn't have matching Gothic posts, so we got creative and used 2x4s. Plus, we're going to add some really nice solar lights on top for a finishing touch. We didn't put it exactly on the property line, but we left them just barely enough room to get by. No chance their trash can or that motorcycle will ever squeeze through again. I already know exactly what I want to plant along the fence next year. Even though our budget is tight and it'll have to wait, I can see the garden in my mind. Part of me wishes this fence could be the end of all the drama, though I doubt it. I hate confrontation, but for once it was an honest relief to take action. I feel a not-so-guilty surge of joy imagining them seething every time they look at our charming Gothic fence, shining with those little solar lights, a constant reminder that they don't get to win. I hope it frustrates them as much as this whole ridiculous ordeal has frustrated us. Update 1. Apparently, we have to share our driveway because our neighbors have to share theirs. It's been 3 days since we started building the fence. My husband, working around the unpredictable weather, his job, and wrangling our toddler, has managed to get 3 posts in. The pace is definitely slow, but steady. We reached out to our bottom neighbor to let them know they might want to move their riding lawn mower. The way the fence layout is going, it would basically trap the mower, locking it in place, and with a dead battery, that's a recipe for frustration. Thankfully, they're already working on getting it moved. And, drumroll, please, the wife of our upstairs neighbors actually approached us. For the very first time, she came over and asked if it would be okay for her son to take their trash can down the driveway just this once. Apparently, with the new posts lined up, he couldn't get through without asking for permission. It might not sound like much, but after everything, this is the first time anyone from their family has shown even a shred of politeness or asked for anything. My husband told her it was fine for this last time, but let her know the fence would be up before the trash can could be brought back, so they'd need to plan for that. Honestly, it works in our favor too. The trash can's been nudged right up against our property line for too long, and now it'll be out of our way for building. I know this isn't the dramatic blowout some people would expect, but to me, this small bit of civility feels like a hopeful sign. Maybe this final act of grace will help smooth things over and bring this neighborly war to an end. But just in case, we're staying ready. Once the fence is up, I'll share a picture and let you know if we get any retaliation from Hothead Dad and his troublemaking son. For now, I'm just savoring this rare moment of peace. Update 2. I am so tired of this situation. Honestly, I can barely keep my eyes open from the frustration. My husband and I were just trying to be considerate to our downstairs neighbor, so I gave them a week's notice. The placement of our new fence posts and panels would end up locking their riding lawnmower in place unless they moved it. These aren't even the tenants we've had huge issues with before, though, for what it's worth, their child and their dog walker have both trespassed on our property too. I still have no idea how our house, positioned squarely in the middle of A through Street, turned into some sort of neighborhood alleyway. Apparently, people just treat our property like a public pathway. Anyway, I did my best to handle things civilly. A week ago, I let them know about our fence plan, and gave them plenty of time to move their lawnmower. Right after I told them, the guy came outside and tried to get the mower running, but the battery was dead. He said he needed a couple days to get a new battery, and I thought, okay, no problem. But a few days passed, and suddenly, I wasn't hearing much from them. When I tried reaching out to let them know my husband wanted to put the posts in the next day, the woman told me that moving the mower was not her priority right now. She was dealing with the aftermath of a miscarriage, which just broke my heart. She said her partner was on top of it, though. Eventually, he got a new battery and managed to turn the mower on. But still, the mower sits there, unmoved. Now he's left jumper cables and a gas can next to it, clearly showing he's done some work, but it's just sitting there, untouched. 2 days have passed since he got it running, and yesterday, the guy was sitting outside grilling burgers, not even glancing at the mower. Neither of them have explained what's holding things up on their end. I just don't get it. Why not put it in neutral and push it away by hand? And here I am, 5 months pregnant, feeling every bit of empathy for her loss. Still, is it wrong for me to wonder why moving this mower has become such an ordeal? Honestly, maybe I've been a doormat through all this, so passive, hoping for an easy, amicable resolution, even when it's costing me time and money for a fence I could barely afford in the first place. But I am reaching my limit. How much longer am I supposed to wait before I just put the post in behind the lawnmower and call it a day? I don't want to create animosity or have two angry families trying to retaliate against us, but I also want this project to actually move forward. On a small but positive note, our other neighbors seem to have started respecting our property line now. They even moved their trash cans to the other side of their house, if you can believe it. I'm still a bit wary, but it is genuinely nice to see at least some progress in this whole ordeal. Update 3. Once we moved the lawnmower, my husband went to tackle the last remaining post, the one that was right where the lawnmower had been parked. It wasn't the final post in the lineup, just the last one we needed to finish. That's when we discovered something that made my heart drop: 600-volt cables running smack dab through the exact spot where our post had to go. We'd already called 811 before starting this whole fence project, and every single company, electric, water, gas, had given us the all clear. So when I saw those thick cables, I was completely blindsided. We had no idea what these cables were for, or if they were even live. My husband had been down in the dirt, digging right next to them with a shovel, and might have nicked them. We called the electric company in a panic and asked them to come out on an emergency basis. When the guy showed up, he looked things over but couldn't actually confirm if the cables were live. His only advice? Just be careful. That was not reassuring. So, we bought our own electric test kit. All our tests said the cable wasn't live, but I was still on edge. My husband, who has some experience with electricity from his job, decided to press on. He dug extremely carefully around the cable and managed to put the post in right next to it. Watching him work with such focus made my nerves buzz. I would never recommend anyone else try this if they ever found themselves in our position. For anyone wondering, yes, we managed to get all the posts in. Now my husband is sanding, staining, and sealing the posts and panels. It's been a marathon, but progress feels so good. Since then, the adults around here have stopped trespassing into our yard. Unfortunately, the older kid still insists on walking down our driveway. Then there's the issue with our downstairs neighbor and their dog. The neighbor moved where they keep the dog, right next to their back door and close to our property line. The dog is kept on an incredibly short leash that's fixed to their door, and every day, they throw food out there, not regular dog food, but random leftovers, lasagna, hot dogs, even pizza still sitting in containers. Now there's an ugly heap of containers piling up, and the bugs are out of control. Biting flies and mosquitoes torment anyone who tries to get close. My husband couldn't finish working on the panels until we sprayed the whole area. I feel so bad for the dog, sitting in that cloud of pests, surrounded by rotting food and trash. The containers and leftover food have been there for days before the dog even touches them, and I can only imagine the mosquito pools that are going to form if this keeps up. At first, I wondered if the trash was accidental, maybe it just got dropped, but after watching the dog eat, it's clear this is intentional. I regret not taking a picture before the dog got to the food, but the scene is burned into my mind. Part of me wonders if the way the neighbor is treating that dog is even legal. To make matters worse, I'm on edge around the dog since I've seen the kids throwing rocks at her. Sometimes she barks and growls when we get close, though she settles down quickly when she realizes it's us. I can't help but hope she knows we aren't a threat, but after her run-ins with the neighbor's kids, I worry something could happen, especially if she ever gets off the leash and crosses paths with my daughter. I'm lost as to what to do next, or if I should do anything at all about the dog's situation. The whole thing feels like it's spiraling into something bigger than just a home improvement project. Update 4. I thought things were finally settling down after we got the fence up, but I should have known better. Life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them, and this week delivered a doozy that I'm still trying to wrap my head around. It started last Tuesday when I was putting my daughter down for her nap. Through the nursery window, I could see into our downstairs neighbor's backyard, not intentionally, but the way our houses are positioned, it's unavoidable. That's when I saw something that made my stomach drop. The woman who'd been dealing with her recent loss was outside with a man I'd never seen before. And they definitely weren't just talking. I tried to look away, but movement caught my eye again. This time it was her actual partner, the guy with the lawnmower, pulling into their driveway. I watched in horror as the woman scrambled to send the other man around the side of the house while she rushed inside. The timing was so close that her partner had to have seen something, but from my vantage point, I couldn't tell how much. For the next few days, things seemed normal enough from the outside, but I started noticing tension. Raised voices through thin walls, doors slamming, and then, silence. The kind of silence that feels heavy, you know? Then yesterday happened. I was in my kitchen making lunch when I heard shouting, not the usual neighbor noise, but real screaming. Through my window, I could see the lawnmower guy storming around their backyard, kicking at things, while she followed behind him trying to calm him down. That's when I noticed something chilling. He was holding what looked like a baseball bat. The poor dog was going crazy, barking and straining against that short leash, and I could see she was terrified. The man started swinging the bat at random objects, their patio furniture, some potted plants, and I genuinely thought he might turn it on the dog next. Or worse, on her. I was reaching for my phone to call someone, police, animal control, I wasn't sure, when everything went quiet again. Too quiet. I crept closer to the window and saw him dragging something heavy across their yard toward the back corner, near where all those food containers had been piling up. My heart was racing because I couldn't see what it was from my angle. About an hour later, she came outside alone and untied the dog, leading her inside. That was the first time I'd seen that dog off the leash in weeks. The man was nowhere to be seen, and his car was gone from the driveway. Here's what's really eating at me, I haven't seen him since then. It's been 2 days now, and there's no sign of the lawnmower guy anywhere. She's been going about her routine, taking out trash, checking the mail, but she looks different. Jumpy. She keeps glancing around like she's expecting someone to show up. And that spot in the back corner of their yard where I saw him dragging something? The ground looks disturbed, like it's been freshly turned over. There are some boards laid across it now, and she's avoided that entire area. I keep telling myself I'm being paranoid, that my pregnancy hormones are making me imagine the worst case scenario. Maybe he just moved out after a fight. Maybe he's staying with friends while they work things out. But something in my gut won't let this go. The whole dynamic of our street has shifted too. The upstairs neighbors have been unusually quiet, no motorcycle revving, no kids causing trouble. It's like everyone can sense something's wrong but nobody wants to acknowledge it. I mentioned it to my husband when he got home, but he thinks I'm overthinking things. He pointed out that domestic disputes happen all the time, and people separate. The guy probably just left. But when I told him about the disturbed ground and how scared she seemed, I could see doubt creep into his expression. I'm torn between minding my own business, God knows we've had enough neighbor drama, and the nagging feeling that I might have witnessed something terrible. Part of me wants to knock on her door and just check if she's okay, but what if I'm wrong? What if I'm just stirring up trouble where none exists? The fence we worked so hard to build was supposed to create boundaries, to give us privacy and peace. Instead, I feel like I'm trapped behind it with a front row seat to something I wish I'd never seen. Update 5. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong next door. It had been 4 days since I'd seen the lawnmower guy, and the silence from their unit was becoming deafening. Yesterday morning, I finally worked up the courage to approach our downstairs neighbor while she was getting her mail. I kept it casual, just asked if everything was okay since things seemed quiet lately. The change in her was startling. Up close, I could see dark circles under her eyes, and she had this nervous energy, constantly looking over her shoulder. When I mentioned that I hadn't seen her partner around, she got this panicked look and quickly said he was visiting family out of state. But her voice was shaky, and she couldn't quite meet my eyes. Before I could say anything else, she practically ran back inside. That afternoon, while my daughter was napping, I noticed a white sedan pull up, not a car I'd seen before. A woman got out, probably in her 50s, carrying what looked like cleaning supplies. She went straight to the downstairs unit and was let in immediately. Through my kitchen window, I could see them talking intensely in their living room. The older woman kept gesturing toward the backyard, and at one point, our neighbor broke down crying. The woman stayed for about 3 hours. When she left, she took several black garbage bags with her, the heavy-duty kind. After she drove away, I watched our neighbor go to that disturbed patch of ground in the back corner. She stood there for a long time, just staring down at those boards. This morning brought a new development that made my blood run cold. I was getting my daughter ready for the day when I heard a knock at our door. It was a police officer, Detective Martinez, asking if I'd noticed anything unusual in the neighborhood recently. Apparently, someone had filed a missing person report. My heart started pounding. I told him about the argument I'd witnessed, the man with the baseball bat, and how I hadn't seen the lawnmower guy since then. The detective took notes and asked if I'd be willing to provide a statement. When I mentioned the disturbed ground in their backyard, his expression got very serious. After he left, I couldn't concentrate on anything. I kept replaying every interaction I'd had with those neighbors, wondering if I'd missed something important earlier. Around noon, I saw Detective Martinez return with 2 other officers and what looked like a cadaver dog. They went straight to the backyard. I tried to keep busy, but I found myself glued to the window. They spent over an hour back there, and I could see them taking photographs of that area where the boards were. The dog seemed particularly interested in that spot, circling and pawing at the ground. Then things got even more intense. They brought our downstairs neighbor outside in handcuffs. She wasn't fighting or screaming, she just looked defeated, like she'd been expecting this moment. As they put her in the police car, she looked up at my window. For just a second, our eyes met, and I saw something there, not anger, but almost relief. The older woman from yesterday showed up again, this time with a lawyer. I could hear them talking to the remaining officers, something about self-defense and years of abuse. It started to paint a different picture of what might have happened that day with the baseball bat. My husband came home early from work after I called him in a panic. He's been trying to convince me that we did the right thing by talking to the police, but I can't shake this sick feeling in my stomach. Did I help put an innocent woman in jail? Or did I help solve something much darker? The upstairs neighbors, the ones who caused us so much trouble with the fence, have been eerily quiet since the police arrived. No motorcycle revving, no kids playing loud music. It's like everyone on the street is holding their breath, waiting to see what comes next. Tonight, as I was putting my daughter to bed, she pointed out the window toward the empty downstairs unit and asked, "Where did the nice lady go?" I realized that despite everything, she'd grown fond of our neighbor, the only adult from either problematic household who'd ever shown us basic courtesy. I don't know what's going to happen next. The house feels different now, like we're living next to a crime scene. Part of me wonders if we should have minded our own business, built our fence, and ignored everything else. But another part of me knows that staying silent when you suspect someone might be in danger isn't really an option. The detective said they might need me to testify if this goes to trial. I never imagined that trying to solve our neighbor problems would end up making me a potential witness in what might be a murder case. Update 6. I thought the worst was behind us after our neighbor was arrested, but apparently this nightmare was just getting started. It's been 2 weeks since they took her away, and the revelations that have come to light since then have completely turned my understanding of our street upside down. First, the house, the landlord, remember her, the property manager who got so offended when I texted her about the trash? Showed up 3 days after the arrest with a cleaning crew. But this wasn't your typical move-out cleaning. They were there for 8 hours, hauling out bag after bag of what looked like carpet, padding, and even sections of subflooring from the downstairs unit. The smell that came wafting out during those hours was something I'll never forget, a mix of bleach so strong it burned your nose and something else underneath that made my stomach turn. What really caught my attention was watching the landlord's reaction. This woman who'd been so dismissive and rude to me was now pacing around like a caged animal, chain-smoking and barking orders at the cleaning crew. At one point, I saw her throw up in the bushes. Whatever they found in there shook her to the core. But here's where things get truly bizarre. Yesterday, I was coming back from a doctor's appointment when I noticed a familiar car in our driveway. Not parked on the street, actually in our driveway, like they belonged there. It was that white sedan from before, the one the older woman had been driving. I pulled up behind it, confused and honestly a little scared. The woman got out before I could even turn off my engine. Up close, I could see the family resemblance. She had the same bone structure as our arrested neighbor, just aged by about 25 years. "You must be the one who called the police," she said, not accusingly, but with this tired resignation in her voice. I wasn't sure how to respond, so I just nodded. She looked around our property, taking in our new fence, our house, the whole setup, and then said something that made my blood freeze. "She told me you were pregnant. How far along?" When I told her I was almost 6 months, she got this look on her face that I can only describe as pure panic. "You need to know something," she said, glancing around nervously. "My daughter. She didn't kill him in self-defense. She's been planning this for months. I felt like the ground was shifting under my feet. This woman was confessing to me that her daughter was a premeditated murderer, standing in my driveway like we were discussing the weather. The miscarriage story? That was a lie to get sympathy from neighbors. She's never been pregnant. The woman, I learned her name was Carol, kept talking, seemingly unable to stop herself. She found out he was planning to leave her for his ex-wife, take the dog, everything. She couldn't handle being abandoned again. Carol explained that she'd been helping cover it up because she was terrified of losing another child. Apparently, her son had died in a car accident 3 years ago, and my neighbor was all she had left. But the guilt was eating her alive. The worst part, Carol continued, is that she specifically chose that spot in the yard because she knew you were pregnant. She said pregnant women are more sympathetic to other women's problems, less likely to call police over domestic disputes. She was counting on you to mind your own business. My hands were shaking as I realized how calculated everything had been. The timing of when she'd approach us, the way she'd positioned herself as the victim in various scenarios, even asking about her son's bike on my cameras had been a way to test how much I actually saw and recorded. But Carol wasn't done. There's something else. She's been in contact with those upstairs neighbors, the ones with the motorcycle. They've been planning something for when she gets out on bail. Apparently, our neighbor had convinced the upstairs family that I was the real problem on the street, that if I hadn't interfered, none of this would have happened. She'd been feeding them information about our routines, when my husband deployed, when I was home alone. Carol had overheard phone conversations from jail where she was still orchestrating some kind of retaliation. She blames you for everything, Carol whispered. In her mind, if you'd just ignored the arguing like everyone else, she could have gotten away with it. That's when Carol told me the most chilling part. Our neighbor had already made bail, she was being released today. I immediately called Detective Martinez, but he said there wasn't much they could do with hearsay from a distraught mother. The evidence they'd found was enough for charges, but she wasn't considered a flight risk, especially with family in the area. As Carol was leaving, she grabbed my arm. Get cameras for your backyard if you don't have them. And maybe don't spend too much time alone outside until this all settles. That was 6 hours ago. About an hour after Carol left, I saw the motorcycle come roaring down our street, not down our driveway this time, but slowly, deliberately, like they were making a point. The rider stopped right in front of our house and just sat there for maybe 10 minutes, engine idling, before finally driving away. My husband is trying to get emergency leave, but it could be days before he can get home. I've been jumping at every sound, checking and rechecking our door locks, and I keep finding myself staring at that empty downstairs unit, wondering when she's going to come back. The fence we built to keep them out suddenly feels less like protection and more like a barrier that could trap us in if things go wrong. I'm starting to think our neighbor war was never really about a driveway at all, it was always about control, and somehow, I became the target without even realizing it.